Hi, I'm Ryan Irwin. This is Access TV in performance with Earle Peach and Barbara Jackson. Together, they are known as Songtree. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, you guys are going to perform a song. What song are you going to perform?
Well, it's called Palaces of Sand, and it was written by Earle.
Quite a few years ago. It's on an album I did in 2008, but Barbara is also singing on it. And it's about relationships and the difficulties that they present. You know, I guess the difficulty of being in love and being honest and being willing to go through it.
Great. Well, let's have a look.
How did we come to this? All of our pain laid bare, all of our tender bliss swept away as though it was never really there. Is it just the fear of drowning that makes us cling to sullen shoals of misery? Or could it be we just don't understand? Maybe we should go to the sea again, just to see what love demands, and let it sweep away all the promises, all the palaces of sand. How do we learn to love when we are so afraid of getting our hearts too deep in a debt that can never be repaid? Do we dive headlong into the waves, pretending everything will be alright, while holding tight to the dream of land? Maybe we should go to the sea again, just to see what love demands, and let it sweep away all the promises, all the palaces of sand. Maybe we should go to the sea again, just to see what love demands, and let it sweep away all the promises, all the palaces of sand.
Now, that was some great harmony. I really loved that harmony. What brought that about?
The harmony?
Yeah.
Well, Barbara and I started singing together actually in the late 1970s. That's just quite a while ago. And so, you know, we've developed a way of harmonizing our voices together that people have commented on for years. So it's always a way of finding harmonies that work for both of our voices.
Do you have any inspirations for harmony, Barbara?
Sure. I mean, I've been listening to music most of my life, and I love harmonies. So, and I've sung in a lot of choirs as well. And we used to walk around together singing, and that was fun. That's one of the ways that we started singing together.
Now, Earle, you wrote the song. What were the circumstances that led to its creation?
You know, songs don't necessarily come from a particular incident. It's more an agglomeration of images that come to you over time, and at a certain point they coalesce into a collection of ideas that seem to have a meaning. So I've written a lot about the sea. I think being on the coast has been a major influence on my life, and so it's affected the way I think about the sea as an image for our lives, and water in general.
What specific meaning does this song have for you?
It's talking about, I think, how at a certain point in a relationship, sometimes you want to give up because things just seem too hard. There's too much pain, too much history. And the suggestion is that sometimes you have to put away the history and just go back to the roots of what the relationship was about. And sometimes that's very difficult to define exactly, you know. So it's a question of how much you can give up and put aside so that you can get to the real stuff.
How long have you two known each other?
Since the late 70s, I was actually hosting a coffee house in Kitsilano. I was working at Kitsilano Neighborhood House, and I was...
So it was music that really brought you two together.
It's true,
It
yeah.
was.
And I had a big crush on Barbara for quite a few years, and then we didn't actually get together till 1984 when she hired me to work at Carnegie Center. And then that was about music too, since I was hosting 2 jams and a cabaret for every week for 16 years. Got to know a lot of musicians in downtown East Side, but that program she started.
More or less. And then I had to replace myself because I had other obligations at Carnegie as a staff person, so that's when I hired him to replace me hosting that cabaret.
Of course, we didn't get together till she stopped being my boss.
Exactly.
Of course.
Of course.
Now, during your time at Carnegie, what influences did you draw from that experience?
You can't spend any time in the downtown East Side without having your worldview changed, you know? When I walked into that neighborhood, I was afraid because I didn't know people living in poverty. I grew up in a middle-class household myself, you know, fairly well-fed, and I made all the usual kind of stupid assumptions about people until I got to know a lot of people in the downtown East Side and understood that there are a lot of folks living there who are incredibly talented and also mutually supportive. It's an amazing neighborhood, amazing community. And there are people who are world-class artists in their own right. You know, there's Bud Osborne was a poet in the downtown East Side whose poetry still moves me deeply every time I read it. So it was a huge learning experience for me, and it still is when I go there.
Barbara, you've been there longer than Earle. What's changed?
Well, I'm not directly working there now, but when I first started working at Carnegie, it was mostly single older men who were coming into Carnegie as basically a refuge. So we kind of treated it as a living room for the folks that lived there. And it was also an alternative to the bars because otherwise most of the community space was found in the bars. And a lot of most of the people a lot of them were older men who basically had kind of burned their bodies out through logging and fishing, and some of them were separated from their families, so they were lonely, and they had turned to alcohol, so there was a lot of alcoholism. There weren't any drugs like there are now.
It all changed.
It was so it was a sense of community and really a sense of family. I had the pleasure of working at Carnegie in the first couple of years of it opening, and then I stayed there longer, but being there at the beginning was really exciting because it was such a sense of idealism and family and community in the work that we were doing together and in the work we were doing for the community.
Right, and you know, I think we were both still working at Carnegie when the first wave of heroin came into the neighborhood. That was shortly after that new crew came into power in Burma and started calling it Myanmar. But for 9 months after that, there was this like flood of cheap heroin, and people started dropping like flies. There were 350 overdose deaths a year in the downtown East Side for 10 years, and it barely made page 10 in the Vancouver Sun. And you know, I started to see a lot of the attitudes of the cops at that time toward people in the downtown East Side. Or they would just take people in the alley and beat the crap out of them just for a lark. And, this was right around the time that women were going missing in the downtown east side as well, many of them. And there were lots of rumors about the police and the Hells Angels kind of hanging out together, having little tete-a-tete sessions. So the neighborhood went through some pretty vicious and overwhelming paroxysms of pain, right? And so I think the culmination of that was the creation of Insight. And Bud was largely, in many ways, he and some other people were largely responsible for pushing for that. So it was a huge victory for folks in that neighborhood. But also, there were other victories like the creation of Crab Park, which is now called Portside Park. But people occupied that space for weeks until they could actually get the Parks Board to agree to make it a public space for people in the neighborhood. And the shutting down of the liquor store at Main and Hastings. And, it's a pretty interesting neighborhood.
Yeah. Now you wrote an opera about the neighborhood, the Downtown East Side Opera.
Well, I wrote the music, but the book was written by Downtown East Side writers. And so there was a lot of interplay back and forth. They were sending me lyrics, and while we were driving east, actually, I'd write something and send it to them. So that was pretty great. And we produced that opera 3 times, featuring singers from the Downtown East Side, musicians from the Downtown East Side. And we did it once at Carnegie, once at the Fire Hall, and once at St. James Community Square, and each time to packed houses. And it was a pretty great event. Yeah.
Well, in the future, with you two together, what kind of music would you like to produce? What kind of a legacy would you like to leave behind?
That's a pretty good question.
Yeah. Well, we made one CD in 2010 that was kind of a, not a culmination exactly, but I hadn't really done any professional recording before, so it was just very exciting for me to put that CD together with the songs that we'd been singing for over 20 years together. And so I feel like that's a little bit of a legacy already, just in terms of, but
we have been talking about doing some more recording recently.
We'll do some more recording. But it's also that we really both feel that music is a way for people to tell stories, but also a way for people to get together. It's very healing. I'm actually a counselor now, so I often try to use music and sound, and I teach workshops about working with chronic pain and healing. And so just the power of music to not only tell stories and tell our own stories and other people's stories and bring people together, but also to really have a profoundly healing effect on the body and the spirit. So we'd like to continue doing that.
I hope that you do. It was great to have you guys on today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on. And I hope you have a great day.
As though it was never really there. Is it just the fear of drowning that makes us cling to sullen shoals of misery? Or could it be we just don't understand? Maybe we should go to the sea again, just to see what love demands, and let it sweep away all the promises, all the palaces of sand.